Good morning, fifth grade. This is Miss J. Welcome back. I hope you guys have had an amazing break and have been able to relax. Today is Monday, April 27th, and we're going to jump right back into math where we left off and discuss patterns. Before we get started, make sure that you have scratch paper, a pencil, and you also have this math lesson open in a separate tab while watching the video. If you haven't done that, take a moment to do that now. Great, let's get started. Today, for our problem-solving task, we're going to look at the numbers given and explain the relationship between each term and fill in the blanks with the missing numbers. When looking at a number pattern, you should always be thinking, are our numbers getting bigger or smaller? If they're getting bigger, then that lets you know that it's either an addition or multiplication number pattern. If it is getting smaller, that'll let us know that it is a division or a subtraction number pattern. Now, keeping that in mind, let's look at our first number pattern. You have 14, 17, and 20. Are our numbers getting bigger or smaller? That's right, they're getting bigger. So we know from my intro that this is either going to be an addition or a multiplication number pattern. So our next job is that we need to figure out the rule. Because every pattern has a rule, and that rule is applied every time we go from one number to the next number in the sequence. So let's look at these numbers. We should always start by seeing if it's a multiplication or an addition rule, because those are the easiest to figure out. From 14 to 17, we're adding 3. Let's see if that's true from 17 to 20. Yes. Yes, adding 17 plus 3 will give us 20. Oh my gosh, it works. So it seems like our pattern here is it seems like our rule here is to add 3. So if that's true, so it seems like every time we're going to move from one number to the next, we're going to add 3. If that's true, check your work. Did you also decide that the pattern was add 3? If you did, awesome. If you didn't, go back and fix your work, pause the video, and then come back. So you should have filled in your next two numbers as 23 and 26. Great. This is an addition pattern, and the rule is to add 3. So every time we're going to talk about a pattern, we need to also say what the rule is. I'd like us to take a moment to pause right here and take notes. So we know that when the numbers are increasing in the sequence, it could be an addition pattern. We should look for that and find the rule. Here, our rule was to add 3. Let's look at our next sequence. 103, 96, 89. Are our numbers getting bigger or smaller? You're right. They're getting smaller. So we know that this must be a subtraction or division pattern. So I'm going to tell you, just like earlier, that it's easier to figure out a subtraction problem than a division problem. So let's start by seeing if it's in a subtraction pattern. So let's go from 103 to 96. Yep, you had to subtract 7. Let's see if that is true for 96 to 89. Yep, we had to subtract 7. So it looks like this is a subtraction pattern, and the rule is to subtract 7. Right now, I want you to go back and check your work and see if you came up with that same rule. If not, I want you to go back and check your work. If you did, awesome, and keep on watching the video. Now, if our rule is to subtract 7, our next two numbers in the sequence is going to be 82 and 75. When the numbers in a sequence are decreasing, it could be a subtraction pattern, and you can find the rule by figuring out how much they are decreasing from number to number. I want you to pause the video and write this down in your notes. Okay, so now that you've taken your notes, we're actually going to skip number 3 and go right to number 4. We're not going to be afraid because they're decimals. We're going to do exactly what we did before. We're going to think about, are these numbers in the sequence getting bigger or smaller? Yep, you're right. They're getting bigger. So now we need to see, is this an addition rule or is this a multiplication rule? Let's start looking at addition. If we go from 8 tenths to 1, we know we're adding 2 tenths. So maybe the rule is adding 2 tenths. Let's see if that's true when we go from 1 to 12 tenths. Yep, we're adding 2 tenths. Let's see if that's true from 12 tenths to 14 tenths. Yep, we're still adding 2 tenths. So in order to continue this pattern, we just have to keep adding 2 tenths. So that means the next number is going to be 16 tenths, and the next one is going to be 18 tenths. So similar to number 1, looked at our sequence. We looked at our sequence and we were able to see that it was an addition problem. So we don't need to add any new notes, but we noticed that the numbers were increasing and we saw that it was an addition pattern, and our rule is to add 2 tenths. So let's go back to number 3. So we're going to start off how we started every other pattern. We're going to decide whether our numbers are increasing or decreasing. 13, 26, 52, 104. Are our numbers increasing or decreasing? That's right, they're increasing. Now, our next job is to figure out what is the rule. When we go from 13 to 26, we're adding 13. When we go from 26 to 52, we're not adding 13. We're adding 26. So we know that it's not an addition rule, so it must be multiplication. So let's see. To get from 13 to 26, What do you need to multiply by? Right, we have to multiply by 2. Okay, so to get from 26 to 52, what do you need to multiply by? That's right. You also have to multiply by 2. Is that true for 52 to 104? Yes, that's right. You have to multiply by 2. So here there's actually a multiplication rule of multiplying each number in the sequence by 2. So our next numbers, if we're multiplying by 2, would be 206, then 416. So again, our rule is to multiply by 2. I want you to pause the video and write down this note that when we notice that the numbers are increasing in a sequence, we could need to find a multiplication rule, and that rule would be that we multiply a number by a factor to get the next number in the sequence. Moving on to number 5. What will the fifth term in the sequence below be? We have 493, 510, and 527. So we know that the first thing that we're going to do by looking at this number pattern is notice if our numbers are increasing or decreasing. Here, our numbers are increasing, so we know that it'll be an addition or multiplication rule. Based on the information that we have, what will the fifth term in the sequence below be? A, B, C, D, or E? Now, if you got 544, that is incorrect. Now, that would mean if you got A, 544, you were able to figure out the rule, but that doesn't answer our question. So first, let's figure out what our rule is. Then we'll talk about what our fifth term in the sequence should be. So to get from 493 to 510, you should have been able to see that if we add 17, we would get our next number. Let's see if that's true for 510 to 527. Is it true? Yes, it is. So our rule here is to add 17. Great. So now let's figure out why is A incorrect. So let's go back to our directions. It's asking what will the fifth term in the sequence below be? Now let's start by defining term. A term is a number in the sequence. So in this number pattern, our first term would be 493. Our second term would be 510, and our third term would be 527. So if we add 17 to 527, we would get 544, which would be our fourth term. But we're looking for the fifth term. So now take a moment to think about it. What would be our fifth term in this number pattern? Right. So if we add 17 to 544, we get E, 561. So in this case, we know that the fifth term, which is the fifth number in the sequence, would be 561. Make sure that you have completed all of your notes, including the definition of a term. To finish off our notes for today, we know that we can solve and complete charts using our knowledge of patterns of ordered pairs. We also can explain the relationship between two terms and state the rule the pattern follows. So right now, I want you to pause the video and complete all of your practice problems. Then you'll come back to the video so that we can go over them together. Welcome back. So you should have completed all of your practice problems so that now we can go over it together. So pattern number 1. Are our numbers increasing or decreasing? That's right, they're increasing. So we know that it's going to be an addition or multiplication rule. In order to get from 71 to 77, what must you do? That's right, we must add 6. Is that true for us to get from 77 to 83? Yes, that is also true. We're going to add 6 again to go from 77 to 83. Now we must figure out what our next numbers in our pattern is going to be. We can clearly see that our rule here is to add 6. So if we add 6 to 83, we would get 89. And then if we add 6 to 89, we would get 95. Awesome. Pattern 2. Are our numbers increasing or decreasing? That's right. They are increasing. 6, 12, and 24. Now let's see if it's addition. 6 plus 6 would get us 12, but 12 plus 6 doesn't get us 24, so this is not an addition rule. Let's try multiplication. We know that 6 times 2 is 12. Is 12, and we know that 12 times 2 equals 24. So this should tell us that our rule here is going to be to multiply by 2. 24 multiplied by 2 is 48. And 48 multiplied by 2 is 96. So for pattern number 2, we are multiplying 2. What is the rule for both patterns? We already proved our thinking by continuing the sequence. Number 1, add 6. Number 2, multiply by 2. Now, Omar wrote a number pattern. The first number in his pattern was 2. He used the rule multiply the previous number by 3 to get the next number. What was the fourth number in Omar's number pattern? So we know from earlier, this is also asking us, what is the fourth term in Omar's number pattern? The first number in Omar's pattern was 2. So if we're going to multiply each previous number by 3, let's figure out what our fourth number is going to be. We know that 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 3 is, that's right, 18. 18 times 3 is, that's right, 54. So what's the fourth number in Omar's number pattern? Is it A, B, C, or D? That's right. Our answer is D. If we follow the rule, multiply the previous number by 3, we will get the next number. And that next number would be 54. Use the below graph to write the pattern. So the graph below is showing yearly summer reading results for boys and girls. So for boys, we have a number pattern of 6, 7, blank, and 9. Our question here is asking, what would you expect to be the number of boys reading at least 2 books in year 7? So these numbers on our y-axis represent the number of students reading at least 2 books. So in year 1, 9 girls read at least 2 books. And in year 1, 6 boys read at least 2 books. And in year 2, 8 girls read about 2 books, at least 2 books. And in year 2, boys have read, 7 boys have read at least 2 books. So now we need to look at year 3 and year 4 to figure out the rest of our number pattern. For year 3, we see that 8 boys have read at least 2 books. In year 3, 8 boys have read at least 2 books. In year 4, 9 boys have read at least 2 books. So if we fill in the blank here, looking at year 3, we know that this is going to be 8. Awesome. And notice that the pattern from each year is that each year, one more boy is reading at least 2 books. Mr. Joyce's pattern is 3/4, 1, 1 4/16, 1 1/2. What are the next 3 terms in his sequence? What is his rule? Now, this may seem a little tricky because we're using fractions, but that's okay. We're just going to use what we know to figure it out. To go from 3/4 to 1, how much do you have to add? That's right, 1/4. Now let's see if that is true for 1 to 1 4/16. Yes, that is true because we know that 4/16 is equivalent to 1/4. So if we know that 4/16 is equivalent to 1/4, we know that 1/4, we know that 1 and 1/4 is the same or is equivalent to 1 and 4/16. 1 and 4/16 plus 1 and 1/2 is also 1 and 4/16 plus 1/4 is 1 and 1/2. So we know that our pattern here is to add 1/4. Knowing that information, what are our next three terms in the sequence going to be? Mr. Joyce's rule is to add 1/4.